But the plebiscite demand, every time Pakistan demanded, Nehru and others and subsequent governments in India have said that the plebiscite cannot be held because you guys didn't withdraw. Now Pakistan has got so, it's become such an article of faith for Pakistan's UN resolution. So when I tell them about UN resolutions on TV debates and things like that, they think I'm talking of some other UN resolution. Because like everything else, doctored information has been fed into them, and these have become articles of faith in Pakistan. So therefore they feel the UN resolution India is trying to fudge. Yes, we are trying to fudge that, because we then went in after the 71 war for a Shimla Declaration. Now what does the Shimla Declaration say? Article 1 of the Shimla Declaration says that the people, I mean the governments of India and Pakistan will respect the charters of the United Nations, which means will respect every UN resolution. And the last article of the Shimla Agreement of June 1972 says that the governments of India and Pakistan with their representatives at a suitable date will sit down to find a final solution over Jammu and Kashmir. That suitable date is 30 years off, but we're still not being able to find that. So Pakistan says that the Shimla agreement is a defunct document. Maybe they've got merit, but there are other issues to the Shimla document about postal exchanges and CBMs and people-to-people interaction. But the big heavy-duty issues are UN resolution and finding a solution to Kashmir. Anyway, so we are at a stage, an impasse has been reached over Kashmir, and so this is where the clock begins to turn slightly differently in India-Pakistan relations. So the first Kashmir conflict, 47-48, there are lots of tales, a lot of heroism, a lot of firsts, tanks used at the highest battlefield in Jojila, an aircraft landing in Leh when there was hardly any airfield, and all that put together, Kashmir became the symbol of conflict between India and Pakistan. Though Pakistan's leaders, Jinnah and gang, were earlier humiliated with nobody wanting to opt for Pakistan as on 15th August 1947. Within Pakistan, those who got Pakistan were bickering and fighting amongst themselves कि साहब ये क्या कर दिया आपने तो हमारा तो शराब पीना हराम कर दिया and whatever else, because then they became an Islamic state. And all those things happened. And remember, East Pakistan, which is Bangladesh, was completely on a different wicket. It was under control of Pakistan, but it spoke a different language, it had different value systems, they dressed differently. You know, the Bengali women wore saris, Pakistanis wore, you know, they were trying to create a culture out of, you know, a mix between Punjabi, Urdu, and anything which was not Indian became the Pakistani raison d'etre for being a Pakistani. So what is the best definition of a Pakistani is one who's not Indian, right? So therefore we are at that stage in history. Now after that I'm going to run you through quickly through a couple of landmarks till I finally come to my quick presentation, and then happy to answer questions. So Kashmir, why does Pakistan claim Kashmir? A, it had a longer border with Kashmir in 47 than India had. Remember, India's connection with Kashmir was at this neck area, which is Jammu, Pathankot, that area. Whereas Pakistan's border with Kashmir ran all along here. So that was one issue. The second was the sources of Pakistan's rivers, and an important lifeline, and as we know water is becoming more and more important, all came through Jammu and Kashmir. So they felt if they don't have access to water, India would strangle them. Now as luck would have it, 2-3 things happened at partition. One was that there was a drought. So the water flow from the Indus systems became less that year. And their crop in Punjab, which was largely a cotton crop and other crops, suffered. And they said, देखो partition हुआ ही इन्होंने पानी रोकना शुरू कर दिया. How you can stop water is anybody's guess. But the fact is, this became an article of faith. It even is today. And if you look at the Indus Water Treaty, which was negotiated between Ayub Khan's time, who later became president and dictator of Pakistan, and the Nehru government, which was actually pushed by the World Bank, and an internationally verifiable arrangement, India has exceeded as per that to give more water to Pakistan. I mean, go into Google and read Mr. Sabharwal's speech at the Karachi Press Club, in which he defines what is the breakdown of the water systems, and you get all the details. So Pakistan's getting more water, but if water doesn't reach Sindh in Pakistan, which is the lower part of Pakistan, Sindh is around there, because Punjab gobbles it all up or mismanages water distribution. Now it is for them to get their act together. Anyway, the top 3 rivers of the Indus water systems, Indus, Jhelum, Chenab, go to Pakistan. It is only Ravi, Beas, Satluj where we have some authority to hold back water and redistribute it within Punjab. So the point is, they are anyway getting the 3 rivers unhindered. Plus they're getting waters from the other 3 rivers, but they're still saying they're not getting enough because they can't get their act together for managing the water. In fact, the Power and Water Secretary of Pakistan is here in Goa for another conference. Ran into him yesterday. But that's another issue. I told him I think we'll discuss it if we have time. So you had the water systems, you had the border, you had a Muslim population. So these were issues which Pakistan felt they rightly had a claim over Kashmir, on the basis of which partition created Pakistan. But I often tell Pakistanis, I said, Huzur, agar aapko partition ke terms of reference acceptable hai, if you accept the terms of reference of Pakistan, if you accept the terms of reference of partition, then you have to accept Kashmir's accession into India. And if you don't accept Kashmir's accession into India, then you're challenging your very existence. Because under those terms of reference, Pakistan was created. Otherwise, you're null and void. Right? They get caught on the wrong foot because they never thought it that way. So, it's the insecurities of a peripheral Asian state, as Robert Veer Singh wrote in his book on Pakistan security in the days of General Zia. But the point is, these are serious insecurities. So then what happened between the 2 countries? You had a war in 47-48. The border wasn't resolved. The LOC, the ceasefire line was formed. In 65, a think tank in Washington tells Pakistanis that if you fight another war with India, on the same lines you fought 47-48 with a few other modifications with the army involved, you could probably win the war and you could get Kashmir. So Pakistan, led by the roaring jingoism of Zulfikar Bhutto, then only 33 years old as Pakistan's foreign minister, who the Nawab of Kalabagh, who was then the governor of Punjab, warned Ayub Khan that don't listen to this guy. His forefathers never held a sword in his life. He doesn't know what battles are about. You lose. But Ayub Khan dismissed the Nawab, went with Bhutto. 65 was a stalemate at best. But what was the strategic lesson that came out of 65 was that India decided to open up on the entire front with Pakistan and not limit the conflict to Kashmir. And therefore, Pakistan was taken off guard, and therefore their focus of their forces on just pushing into Kashmir and liberating Kashmir militarily went for a 6. After 65, Pakistan began to claim 65 is a victory. On what grounds? We can all sit down and take guesses. Then you have, by 69, the entire political equation in Pakistan going for a 6. Remember, between 62 and the humiliation of the Chinese assault, for which I do lay a lot of blame on not just Pandit Nehru and Krishna Menon, but also on weak-spined military leaders who went along with them. And those who felt differently should have had the guts to resign and walk out, but they didn't. So eventually we had the humiliation of 62, which led Pakistan to believe that India is militarily broken, so they can get a victory from us in 65. They tried some incursions in the area which is known as the Run of Kutch, which is north of Gujarat. And India did not respond too aggressively, just held back. So they said, see, they've lost the nerve to fight. And therefore, in the 65 operations, when they decided to go into J&K, then we have a situation before that the Hazrat Bal Mosque, which hosts the beard of the Prophet, the Moe Muqaddas, it disappeared mysteriously. It led to some riots in Kashmir and came back mysteriously to the mosque. But in between, the rioting gave the Pakistanis reason to believe that Kashmiris are agitating against Indian rule, so let's go in. Eventually, nothing came out of it. But in 69-70, elections in Pakistan led to Sheikh Mujib having 160 seats out of 162 seats in the constituency, what was then East Pakistan, now Bangladesh. And in this side, Bhutto had 80 seats out of 94. But Bhutto still insisted he become Prime Minister. And the Bangladeshis went up in arms and were very angry and upset, and somebody climbed up on the Dhaka Secretariat building and tore the Pakistani flag. So the Pakistan army was asked to take over and sort the Bengalis out. If you go to Dhaka Club now also, up the stairs to the dining hall are pictures of genocide. I don't know which Pakistanis and which Bangladeshis still say they are brothers after the kind of genocide that happened there. But anyway, it blew a hole through the two-nation theory that Muslims are Muslims and non-Muslims are non-Muslims. I've been accused the other day on television of being more Hindu than the Hindus of India, but anyway, that's another story. But the fact is that Pakistanis could not hold Bangladesh, which is East Pakistan, together on the basis of religion. So then Pakistan went into a state of depression. The army stood humiliated. The Hamidur Rahman report very clearly brings out how humiliated Pakistan's army felt. And Bhutto emerged from that, of all this, having led them into 65 war and the defeat, in which he told Ayub Khan, you've lost more territory in the Tashkent agreement than on the battlefield, so please go home. Ayub took exile in Britain. And in 71, he led Pakistan, Yahya Khan, into conflict with India, who between his Sharab and Noor Jahan and conflict got it all wrong. But anyway, the fact of the matter, Bhutto emerges from this as the hero of Pakistan, as the savior of Pakistan. He comes to India for the Shimla agreement in June, in which he tells Mrs. Gandhi that I can settle the border and therefore the line of control before the Shimla agreement. General Prem Bhagat, the famous Victoria Cross from the Indian Army, who was also part of the Henderson-Brooks report and who was also part of the first ceasefire agreement arrangement in Karachi, and he signed the Suchetgarh agreement with Lieutenant General Hamid Khan of the Pakistan Army, demarcating what is now the line of control, which Pakistan in Kargil in 1999 decided to challenge, but the world sanctified the line of control to say, Clinton said to Nawaz Sharif, respect the line of control. That means for all practical purposes, the international community has accepted the line of control as a border. So, 72, Mrs. Gandhi wanted this happen. Mrs. Gandhi was out-talked by Bhutto, who had made his entire career on anti-Indianism. Remember, his grandfather fled from India with the Nawab of Junagadh. And Bhutto's family and his Mausi and all were in Jodhpur. But that's another personal story. But anyway, the point is that Bhutto said, Bharosa kijiye. Give me a little time. Let me settle down. I'll convert this into a border. I'm new. He went back to Pakistan, took away 23,000 prisoners of war that we got in the largest surrender in any military operation since World War II. Perhaps even in World War II, there wasn't such a big surrender. But anyway, that's another story beautifully articulated in General Jacobs' book, Democracy in War and Peace, in which he has spelled out how the operation went and how, through quirks of fate, he managed to pull the surrender off. But surrender took place. Pakistan got back their soldiers. They swore another 100 years war with India. Bhutto then launched into making Pakistan truly a theocratic state. It's another matter that he couldn't go to bed at night without his whiskies. But Pakistan had Jummah as a holiday. Pakistan suddenly banned liquor. Pakistan did all sorts of things to suddenly become a theocratic state. And Shimla agreement, though was an agreement after the 71 war, was to discuss the future of India-Pakistan relations in Bangladesh. It ended up defining what would be the arrangements over Kashmir. What were the arrangements? That it will remain a bilateral issue, but between Delhi and Islamabad. Kashmiri leaders were not invited to the talk, Sheikh Abdullah or Karan Singh or whoever. And the Shimla document would set the pace for future relations between the two countries. So India keeps going back to the Shimla agreement because that is the only thing that the Congress governments in India have as a face-saving document after a complete mess-up of handing over 93,000 prisoners of war to Pakistan and getting damn oil. Right. Post-Shimla agreement, Pakistan launched an exercise A to become quickly nuclear to counter any future Indian aggression. It became an article of faith with Pakistanis that India would be an aggressor in a future conflict. Having taken away Bangladesh, they would now try and break Pakistan into two, and therefore, when they finally initiated the proxy war in Kashmir in 1989, they called it doing a Bangladesh on India. Also, please remember that Pakistan went de facto nuclear in 1987. India did a so-called peaceful nuclear explosion. Ask me what is peaceful and non-peaceful nuclear explosion, and I don't know. But the fact is, we called it a PNE. Now, peaceful nuclear explosion, so we were kind of, and all the other arrangements in the international community like the NPT, CTBT and all that, came out in response to India going nuclear. So the Nuclear Suppliers Club, for example, of which now we are a revered member, that was set up against India and eventually admitted India to Pakistan's annoyance. 89, you had a period of 80s in Pakistan where you had the first jihadi head of state, General Zia. Now Pakistan had a military ruler in the form of Ayub, who came in October 10th, 1958. And he came in because Pakistan's leadership couldn't get its act together of governing Pakistan. Between Ayub's taking over Pakistan and between independence and Ayub's taking over Pakistan, Pakistan had 8 prime ministers in a period of almost 10 years, or 6 prime ministers in 7 years, whichever way you look at it. Ayub's stretch was a good stretch. Pakistan was being modeled as a model for third world governance, and the concept of basic democracies had begun to take root all over the world. Ayub was misdirected by Bhutto, led to conflict, took exile, went away. Years later, Zia came in. Again, similar profile. Like Ayub, seen non-controversial, therefore promoted army chief out of turn. Like Ayub, finally took over the country, but this time because Bhutto was driving Pakistan into a one-party state, dismantling governments in the provinces here, there and other. But then Zia had his own agenda. He was the first jihadi head of state and decided to Islamize an Islamic Pakistan. And this he did by creating a whole lot of new Sharia laws, etc. But he set together a strategy for Pakistan which works even today. That is to bleed India by 1,000 cuts. So don't go to war with India, but push proxy conflicts and bleed India by 1,000 cuts. And therefore, first, he began by challenging the sanctity of the line of control by trying to put troops in the Siachen Glacier, which is north of Kashmir, and I'll give you a bit more about Siachen as we go along. But he decided to challenge the sanctity of the LOC, because Siachen is neither divided by LOC nor ceasefire line, it's in no man's land. Though the agreement for the CFL says there shall be no man's land, but Siachen was a no man's land. And Indian troops preempted Pakistani design, and we put troops into Siachen. Having put troops into Siachen, Zia was further upset, and then he put together part 2 of his strategy, which some have called TOPAC. TOPAC is not topaz, but it is TOPAC after Tupac Amaru of Latin America, those of you who are Latin American studies. Now, the fact is that he decided to run over Kashmir by fifth columnists, jihadis, proxy elements, etc. And there Kashmir, once again, thanks to wise political leadership, despite the warnings of army generals, and this is on record, they ignored it and let Kashmir slip into the chaos, being constantly in a state of denial, till we woke up to what a mess we had made. And then between 89 and 94 was when we began to decide to admit publicly that we have a problem in Kashmir. And as I told Mr. Advani in 1999 as part of the study group of Centre Policy Research, जैसा आप चुप बैठे हैं तो मैं कहा सर मैं इतना जूनियर हूँ मैं क्या बोलूँ. He said नहीं let's have your view also, and they were all great wise men with grey hair who were out there. I said, sir, I have only a one-line solution to Kashmir. You solve the problems in Kashmir, you won't have a problem of Kashmir. So those of you who understand insurgency and internal politics, give this a thought. This is really the sum of the problem in Kashmir. But anyway, we had Kashmir, we had Siachen, we had Zia initiating a proxy conflict. And this has gone on till we had Kargil in between, we had nuclear tests. The nuclear tests, everyone thought that after that the world's going to go up in flames. They didn't realize that even Browns can think, and it is not the prerogative of only the white man to have strategic deterrence and nuclear balance and etc. etc. In fact, we've done much better in the nuclear arms race than the West has done. They only realized that they couldn't blow each other up only when they had an arsenal of 10,000 bombs each. We came to that conclusion with 100 bombs. But anyway, having done that, 98 May was crucial for the strategic debate in South Asia. However, there are 2 points of view. One is nuclear weaponization stops full-fledged conventional conflicts because of the fear that at some stage you might decide to use nuclear weapons. But the other view is also that nuclear weaponization provides you strategic space to do short, small, swift conflicts like we had in Kargil. So both arguments are valid. We can get into that later on. Having said all that, we are now in a situation where India and Pakistan are now living with Pakistan being convinced that India doesn't have the guts to call its bluff, because whether it uses regular troops or jihadis, the threat of wanting to use nuclear weapons against us keeps India on tender hooks. And our National Security Advisor, Mr. Shiv Shankar Menon, has recently been on record to suggest that there were 3 nuclear threats faced by India since independence. One was during Nixon's time in the 71 war, when the 7th Fleet came into the Bay of Bengal, the first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier enterprise leading the fleet, and then subsequently during the standoff during brass tacks, and finally during Kargil. Brass tacks was 1990, an exercise which was meant to basically test military reaction, but interpreted as Pakistan as a potential launch pad for a full aggression and a breakup of Pakistan. There's a separate debate, I don't want to go into that. But having said all that, so where are we now? We are now in this kind of a situation. I've taken this slide from a presentation by an eminent South Asia scholar, Stephen Cohen, that the areas of disagreement between India and Pakistan are the following. There is Kashmir, there is national identity, there is nuclear and military doctrines, there is territorial dispute, I'll give you a bit about that just in a while, and massive trust deficit. Most of this is self-explanatory, but I've touched upon almost all of them, but I'll keep going over it again and again in this. But recently there was a very interesting seminar at the United Services Institute in Delhi, where great eminences from the Indian side, having studied and debated about India-Pakistan relations, came up with what would be the issues that really concern us. So the first thing was the current diplomatic status between India and Pakistan. What is the status? One is that post-nuclear test 1998, India assumed that a dialogue was the only way forward since conventional conflicts were passé. But we did have a conventional conflict in Kargil, so that assumption was a bit wrong. Pakistan observed that with Kashmir issue and was obsessed with Kashmir and continued to use proxy war. Post 9/11, Pakistan's status revisited and non-NATO military ally as the world, and also which was beginning to be keen to court India. So initially there was this excitement after 9/11 that Pakistan is a great American NATO ally. America, after 10 years and over $660 billion in Afghanistan and about $25 to $30 billion, the total investment of $700 billion, has now realized they're back to square one. So they wasted 10 years and $700 billion to understand what we understood to start with. However, Indo-US strategic partnership made China and Pakistan suspicious of India, which I'm talking of the special nuclear arrangement and George Bush's only wise move as president. Dialogue, however, no more composite since 26/11, as India is now firm that Pakistan must do more on the terror issue. Pakistan's global godfathers are the US, China and Saudi Arabia. However, of late, Pakistan's magic to them to keep them interested is failing. US now concludes Pakistan the most dangerous ally, but Pakistan now needs the United States more. So as far as Indo-Pakistan dialogues go, which is primarily spearheaded by Mr. Manmohan Singh himself, much against the wisdom of the rest of the people of India, but here, now China suspects a Pakistani role in Xinjiang uprisings, and China now wants terror camps closed in Pakistan. And even I've heard Pakistanis as distinguished as Ahmed Rashid recently at a talk at ISS in London say that Pakistan's only hope of anybody wanting to do anything with Pakistan is now India. India, Pakistan now have significant confidence building measures, such as a hotline between foreign secretaries other than the earlier much touted never working hotline between the DGMOs. Warnings of missile tests are given, visa liberalization, etc. Though India now is in a stronger position for a dialogue, but nothing substantial has moved forward and the composite dialogue has run its course. So a new paradigm should be examined, perhaps by separating disputes from progress areas. India must also simultaneously send a clear signal that Indian security is non-negotiable. Secondly, make Jammu and Kashmir a core issue. India shouldn't shy away from it. As I said to you, that UN resolutions are also in our favor. I don't know why we keep hiding under the table. And thirdly, make public the agreed status of backdoor diplomacy and make Pakistan move on them. I heard many Pakistanis say again and again that what was decided between Musharraf's time and then Manmohan Singh ji's time is really the answer. And I've asked all of them and they don't want to say it because I don't think anything was decided. Now, there is Mr. B.G. Verghese, who is the cartographic expert on India-Pakistan relations, has brought out 2 or 3 things. That, you know, in the case of Siachen conflict, and here is a map of the Siachen area, if you see the map of J&K, north of J&K where it's written the Karakoram range and next to that is the Ladakh range, a little higher up on Karakoram range is a brownish spot and a yellow spot, and that's where the Siachen glacier is the largest glacier outside the poles, 76 kilometer long depth. It was identified by a British couple in 1846, but has remained a huge source of snow, which can eventually lead to water. But it is also of strategic significance because if Pakistan gets a hold of it, then it can dominate the entire Ladakh region by sitting on those heights there. But the cartographic error on Siachen, which India had failed to point out at the earlier stages, has led to now the world seeing India as an aggressor there. LOC as a boundary first considered by Nehru and Sheikh Abdullah, and then sanctified by Clinton during the Kargil conflict, and now offered as the Musharraf ideal apparently. Is the LOC as border acceptable to India now? It may perhaps be so, because that parliamentary resolution of 1994, when Indian parliamentarians said we stake claim to all parts of Jammu and Kashmir, legal experts including Justice Sachar told me that died with that parliament. India-Pakistan claims over Siachen based on separate interpretations of the 1949 ceasefire line. The ceasefire line, let me show this to you, ladies and gentlemen. This is very important to understand. This is the crux of all the problems. The ceasefire line really runs from here, and it terminates at a place called NJ 9842 next to Chorbatla. NJ 9842 is the last mountainous or trigonometric height, where after which the ceasefire line had used the terminology that beyond NJ 9842 it should then run northwards into the glacier. The Pakistani argument was based on two things. One was faux pas by the then foreign minister in a parliamentary statement in March 1973, in which he said it should run east of 9842 and then northwards, because east of Chorbatla, which is the last village, it runs a bit east, then it goes northward. Pakistan sticks to the eastern part. So therefore their argument is it should run eastwards and join up to the Karakoram Pass. If it does, then the Siachen glacial area becomes part of Pakistan. Remember, this part of J&K was illegally acceded by Pakistan to the Chinese called the Shaksgam Valley. And this is the Siachen glacier region. The fighting is on this hill face, which is called the Saltoro Ridge. The Pakistanis sit about 10 kilometers away. They have never stepped foot on Siachen, but they call this Siachen base camp, and they get the journalists to come and do piece to cameras that they are standing in Siachen, so every Pakistani believes they are there. My argument is, don't give up Siachen till you can get an internationally verifiable agreement on a dotted line, getting Pakistan to accept they never got there, and only then accept the LOC as a border and wrap the matter up. Now that is the cartographic debate about Siachen. We can go into more details, but broadly speaking, that is the issue. General Raghavan has brought out several other points. He is the old guru on Siachen, having written a book on Siachen and commanded 3 days in Ladakh, then which is now in Karoo. But Siachen is an outcome of cartographic errors. Pakistan's belief that India wants to pull out and lacks the resources to stay is completely wrong. Even at most, our cost of stay in Siachen is not more than 1,000 crores, which is about 200 million US, which is 1/200th of our defense budget of 199 crores, 199,000 crores, right? So therefore, it doesn't pinch us. But Pakistan likes to believe that we are really getting a hammering out there, because they get a hammering at the Siachen base camp where avalanches come. We are sitting on a hilltop where there are no avalanches. Okay, no loss of troops of late. Siachen, in fact, is cheaper to maintain troops on than the Kargil region. And when Musharraf was asked, why did you do a Kargil on us? Why did you do the Kargil conflict? And he said, why did you do a Siachen on us? And he's right. We preempted them, we got there first, because we didn't want to be caught flat-footed like in 62. The Pakistani army and the media have been writing, Malia Lodi, their biggest apologist, about the reason being why the Pakistan must have a demilitarized zone. But the demilitarized zone cannot be accepted if you go on the basis of the ceasefire agreement, which defines the ceasefire line and which in turn defines the LOC. And the LOC is the modified ceasefire line. And both are governed by the same document, which says there shall be no man's land. So a demilitarized zone is a no man's land. How can you have a no man's land? Okay. And therefore, India had offered to Pakistan the Shimla agreement to convert the LOC into a border, but Pakistan failed to do so. So having done that, let me go to the other tricky issue, which is not too tricky and is not too big, is the Sir Creek dispute. Now people ask me, where is the Sir Creek? Sir Creek is on the coast of Gujarat, and it is basically a tidal wave which India and Pakistan are fighting over. It's essentially Pakistan and India have based their arguments on a 1914 document which defines what Sir Creek is. Pakistan says Sir Creek's border is on the eastern side, which is touching the Indian coast. India actually first started off by saying it's on the western side, touching Pakistan's west coast. But now we are willing to accept the Thalway principle, which means the center of the waterway needs to be defined. Why there is a conflict over the waterway is essentially because if you go beyond the waterway and as an angular thing it extends into the sea, it becomes a 200-kilometer wide, 200-kilometer long and 2.5-kilometer wide area in the sea in which lies oil, by the way. And then this is a familiar picture, 26/11 attacks. And after that we have lots of views on terrorism. It's there on television all the time. And Pakistan is convinced that after 26/11 and the weak responses by Mr. Manmohan Singh's government, that India cannot act affirmatively. We keep expecting the US to punish Pakistan, but the US law is essentially for US citizens. And if US citizens can only be extradited or picked up or punished, those can be done for those people who kill US citizens. The US, please remember, ladies and gentlemen, is a selfish country, and its intentions are only to protect its own interests, and therefore, if we have to fight our battles, we have to fight it ourselves. The long and short of Mr. Raman's recommendations are that India should make a can-do list of what we can do with Pakistan vis-a-vis terrorism. And it doesn't have to be a 3-helicopter-led SEALs attack. It can be other things by using people in Pakistan who will be happy to harass or shoot at people like Hafiz Saeed and others who are the mentors of Pakistan's terror movement against India. Remember, Pakistan's courts say, and perhaps rightly so, that they have no evidence against Hafiz Saeed. You don't get evidence very easily against ideologues. Did Bin Laden ever shoot a man? But you still went and got him. Why? Because he was the ideologue of an anti-US movement. So that likewise, these guys are ideologues of anti-India movement, and they talk of khoon ki daryaएं and all that stuff. And that itself is proof enough for India to say, and I have argued on television and otherwise, and so does Mr. Raman also say, that if you are willing to give $10 billion for a sinking European Union, can't we put $10 million to get Hafiz Saeed?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's a choice we have to make. And finally, trade issues. Mr. Sikri, again a former ambassador, has talked of a number of things in terms of India-Pakistan trade. My hunch is trade will only benefit Pakistanis, because 1/4 of Pakistan's, the total trade from India to Pakistan right now, 1/4 of it reaches through borders, 3/4 through Dubai. So you will legitimize Pakistan grows and makes very little of anything which is modern in terms of technology, etc. So, I mean, other than women wanting Pakistani salwar kameez in India, I don't see we stand to gain of anything with trade with Pakistan. But if it humors them and it does well for them, go ahead and do it. We are pouring money like anything in Afghanistan. I have a problem with that also, because if you're going to put 2 billion in Afghanistan, you'd have done too well by putting $1 billion each in Nepal and Bangladesh, and you'd not have Guji's elements coming in from there, right? The fact of the matter is you're putting money in Afghanistan, you want to be on the high table, but at the London and Chicago conference, you were clapping from behind. So that brings me, ladies and gentlemen, to the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know I've been gone a bit over the top, but it's a very vast subject.
While the major thrust of his presentation certainly was historical, I mean, there was a need for us to understand a bit of a history to come down to the present. He leaves us a wide range to reflect upon, and I'm sure that would follow insofar as discussions are concerned. Just to flag a few issues, while Mr. Raza's presentation did mention the very important state-to-state dynamic, well, there is also another important dynamic with regard to people. And sometimes the question comes up is that, well, maybe the governments are antagonized, the militaries are antagonized. There is also the view that when it comes to people, there are natural commonalities, affinities. Indians coming to Pakistan or Pakistanis coming to India will have totally different sets of experiences. So how do you resolve this? Antagonistic state, but cordial people. Where does the problem lie there? If we forget for a moment the bilateral dynamics of India and Pakistan, is it that Pakistan perhaps now is far too engrossed in a larger geopolitical game to such an extent that perhaps the bilateral won't work at all? Sometimes we test a theory in our classrooms. I say there is a cyclical theory with regard to Indo-Pak relations. We can either have the Lahore summits or Agra summits, but these highs will be followed by the Kargils. So ultimately it's a cyclical process that will go on, and maybe there may be tangential liberations now and then. So I mean, is there a way we can move out of this cycle and go somewhere? And then finally, with regard to your solution, I mean, you said do this in Kashmir and wrap it up. There is also the view that, well, for Pakistan it's not Kashmir which is important. Maybe it's the Kashmir issue which is important. Pakistan needs an issue to perhaps maintain a posture towards India, which has been the basis of its own creation. So this is a very wide landscape. We have around half an hour for discussion. So we welcome comments and questions.
Can I just 2 points?
Okay, and just as you ask questions, may I request you to just briefly identify yourself, and maybe you will take 2-3 questions together, and then. So a couple of points.
In response to actually some very valid points Dr. Tripathi has brought out, and I mean, because I was trying to cover so much, I didn't go into it, but the fact is that as far as people-to-people relations, it cuts both ways. There is a desire to increase visa, there is a desire to create greater interactivity in the state of Jammu and Kashmir with their people on that side. There are right now 1 or 2 crossing points. They want to eventually make them into 5 crossing points for trade and various things. But having said that, there is a view amongst the intelligence, and maybe the intelligence community is too hawkish, but there is a view that visas given to Pakistan for cricket matches and cricket diplomacies don't solve the problem. In fact, many of the people who enter India through those visas for cricket matches disappear into the Indian Union, and they become another set of sleeper cells that are there. There is a view that at the people-to-people level, you get excellent hospitality from the Pakistanis whenever you go there. But talk of Kashmir and you'll probably be shown the door. So there is that element. It's fine till such time you don't talk of the core issue. As Dr. Tripathi has brought out that Kashmir, and in my rush, I forgot to mention that and I've often written about and I've said all that it is Kashmir that binds Pakistanis together. And as Mani Shankar Iyer has said in one of his writings also, that you take Kashmir away from Pakistan and particularly their politicians, and they'll be left in the boat on the sea without rudderless, right? They don't know where to go. Therefore, Kashmir binds them together more than their sympathy for the people of Kashmir. I have often said this with due respect to Kashmiris who might be here. My sister is married to Kashmiri also. But let me say that to assume that when you go to Pakistan, you'll get preferential treatment. Even the promise of an economic bailout doesn't hold anymore. Pakistan can't pay its own bills. Now, when it comes to doing anything for the Kashmiri people, it is not so important as the symbol of Kashmir, Kashmir Hamara. That's one issue. In the absence of institutions, in the absence of any sense of pride in anything in Pakistan, except for an odd cricket victory here and there, that Pakistanis have nothing that holds themselves together more strongly than Kashmir. As far as terrorism goes, and I just want to throw that bit in also, it might come up in the question, that why terror? Why does Pakistan use terror? If Zia's policy was to bleed India by 1,000 cuts, that was perhaps for Jammu and Kashmir. But terrorism has become, sadly, and Dr. Manmohan Singh himself referred to this after 26/11. Why I say Dr. Manmohan Singh with emphasis? Because he's otherwise seen to be rather sort of polite and passive in his approach to things and not as hawkish as some others. But he has said that Pakistan has continued to use terror as an extension of its foreign policy. And therefore, that the terror groups have now become, even Pakistan's run into flack from the US, that do something about the Haqqani network. But Kayani, Pakistan's army chief, who's easily the man who runs the country, I mean the Prime Minister who we shake hands with and think that we're talking to the right guy, he's number 4 in the order of precedence. The first is the army chief, the second is the president, and who else? I forgot. ISI head. And then is the Prime Minister. So, this facade of dealing with Pakistanis on the same prism, you look at them as Indians, I'm sorry, their system works differently. And terror is the head, terror is an extension of their foreign policy, and it's a tool that keeps India unsettled. By the same argument, sorry to say so, ladies and gentlemen, I'm one of those who argue that an unsettled Pakistan is good for India. A stable Pakistan is a nuisance for us. And those who argue otherwise, give me factual data and I'll give you mine. Questions, please.
And same Professor from Goa say Pakistan has been made an India hate policy throughout its existence, as we find in general terms. How India is going to face successfully because so far we feel we are not been able to face it properly. How we can face it in a manner that we will be stronger than Pakistan.
Maroof, my name is Maroof Raza. I spent 6 years wanting to join the army. One of the reasons I didn't join the army because I felt that Pakistan was not our enemy number one. I believe China and America is our enemy number one, because when you have friends like America, you don't need enemies. Sir, my question to you, sir, is in a hotel lobby out of India, I came across a gentleman who I believe who looked like me. He ended up being a Pakistani, intellectual Pakistani. So in the spirit of Aman ki Asha and destroying the Jang ki Nasha, I opened a dialogue with him. His contention was the justification for the proxy war which Pakistan is having in Kashmir is in reciprocation for our Mukti Bahini in Bangladesh in 71. And that's the only motivation for it to continue. Looking at it from looking at it from your point of view, do you think it's a just point, sir?
No, I did.
So my name is Abigail. I'm studying in VM Sargankar College of Law. My question to you is based on the problem of terrorism that not only India but the whole world is facing because of Pakistan. So do you feel that it is in the best interest of India and the world that Pakistan have a military rule, or is it that every time some kind of situation happens that we have to have USA which enters Pakistan and removes the terrorism? Or is there any other solution which can help the world rather than a military and which is a more violent form of a solution for Pakistan? Is it in the strategic interest of India?
See, it's a very good question. I have in fact always believed that if you want a lasting solution with the Pakistanis, then you have to sign a deal which the military also is a co-signatory of. If you see all earlier arrangements with Pakistan, the ceasefire line arrangement, the Indo-Pak water treaty, Indus water treaty arrangement, and even thereafter the Suchetgarh arrangement of the line of control, the military was a co-signatory. And because the military was a co-signatory, history, and I've done a lot of work on Pakistan's military, and I'm convinced that their military is really if they sign on something, they can be relied upon to honor it. As against the political leaders, whatever commitment they give you, they have to go back to Rawalpindi to get their clearance. In fact, I've even written about, and I was in quite, I don't know, I'm not taking entirely the credit for it, but coincidentally, after I began to write about it, and one of the editorials I wrote after the 26/11 attacks on Times of India, it was on 13 December 2008, in which, and then again on the first anniversary of 26/11, again in Times of India, titled Are Still Sitting Ducks. And I've said in both cases, you get that military over on board to sign every document. The problem is our bureaucracy. Our bureaucracy does not want our military to take a high-profile role. It's a Nehruvian hangover. I can give you full details of the role, but our military has traditionally never had any desire for taking over the country, whatever Shekhar Gupta might say in his front page story in the Express. And our military, therefore, is very cognizant and very conscious of the ground reality. Had we had the military in our post-65 dialogue, we would not have given away Haji Pir It was some diplomat who went there without knowing the relevance of RGP and how difficult it was to get it, he gave it off. So we have to have the military, and to get their military on board, our bureaucracy and the diplomats have to accept that our military will also sit in on talks. And while we are at talks, we can check with them that, do you think we can give this village near Rajouri away and accept the LOC as a thing, instead of saying, "Agli baar phir milenge." Every time it's a next time and you never reach a solution. So first thing is, I feel that whether you have a military rule in Pakistan or not, you have the military on board in talks. Because they can look at a Pakistani diplomat and give the nod and say this is acceptable, and Rawalpindi will honor it. So the document can move to a level which it becomes an acceptable joint statement. First. Second aspect is that why Pakistan is wanting to do a Bangladesh on India and Kashmir. I referred to that while I was speaking also. It's deep in their psyche, a sense of revenge. More than that, a sense of humiliation. They want to get even for everything. Yes, we got involved with the Mukti Bahini, but we got involved with the Mukti Bahini because Pakistan had created a situation there where we had 10 million refugees, and the refugees wanted to go back home. So we supported that operation. And if you look in international law, we failed to argue it then, but the Americans argued it in Grenada in 1982. Military intervention in support of humanitarian causes is something which international law will be willing to condone. So if we went in 71, it was our failure of our policymakers not to articulate it enough, but it was a military intervention in support of a humanitarian mission. And Pakistan's involvement in J&K is not a military intervention. In fact, they would do favor to the Kashmiris by pulling out of there and giving some stability and a decent life to those people. They're actually playing the card in the obverse manner. But I mean, how can you avoid? मेरे को किसी ने कहा था once कि आपके सारे पंडित लगे हैं दिल्ली के अंदर एक प्रॉब्लम सुलझाने के लिए, and which is Kashmir, लेकिन पठानों ने आपका नंबर काट दिया. You know, who otherwise, pardon my saying so, are meant to be not as cerebral as South Indian bright minds. But the point is that we are trying to look at it in a complicated manner. But you know, even the biggest problems on earth often have simple solutions. As somebody once said, the art of genius is in keeping things simple. So if you want a complicated problem solved, look at it in its simplest manner and you can solve it. But provided you address the essentials. The problem, I mean, you remember one thing, we blame Pakistan for Kashmir, but you know, I always try to be as objective, and I've spoken about Indo-Pakistan relations abroad, and Pakistanis have walked up to me and said to me that, you know, if this is what you have to say, then our government has lied to us for 30 years or 40 years. The pointed issue is, I admit Pakistan's got a locus standi over Kashmir if you go back to the argument of partition. Also to admit, yes, they have a role, right? But not necessarily the role they're playing right now. You could look at joint administration, you could look at, you know, a whole lot of other arrangements which will give Kashmiris. I've asked Pakistanis on television that I give you 3 options, choose one, and this includes Gauhar Ayub Khan, former foreign minister. I said option 1, accept the LOC as a border. Option 2, accept this joint autonomy or the autonomy for the people of Kashmir. Option 3 is complete independence. I said there are a lot of people south of Delhi who are willing to accept complete independence for J&K. But Pakistanis don't want that. They want complete accession of J&K into Pakistan. Once that is done, then they want to look at the next set of arguments. And yes, Dr. Tripathi had rightly brought up the humanitarian issue, the Kashmiris, etc., caught up in a crossfire. But let me tell you, I mean, you know, I've said this in public forums and it upset Seema Mustafa, who writes now for whatever, earlier she used to write for India. And I said, when was the last time Kashmiris said thank you to India? You know, we've poured in a lot of money there. We've tried to do our bit. Pakistan will go bankrupt trying to support Kashmir the way we do. You look at planning commission figures, the kind of money that has gone into Kashmir. A lot of soldiers sitting here have lost their dear ones. A lot of families have also been, you know, widowed and otherwise battling it out. Now, I'm not saying the soldiers have a case and the others don't have a case. Everyone's got a case there. But the pointed issue is that, please understand, the involvement militarily or otherwise of whoever in Kashmir has been a consequence of Delhi's failures. Delhi has failed to recognize Kashmir as an issue long after it became a real sore point. Nehru was asked once, then how do you look at the politics of Kashmir? He says the politics of Kashmir at the end of the day is the politics of personalities. So therefore Nehru invested in Sheikh Abdullah. Sheikh Abdullah said one thing in Delhi and one thing in the valley. So therefore there are a lot of people in the valley who assume that Sheikh actually promised them independence. But I asked Mehbooba Mufti once in a TV debate, sitting next to me, and there was a break. I said, "आप लोग आज़ादी आज़ादी का नारा लगाते हैं, इससे I mean, do you know, research have shown by the Pew Institute and others that 73% of Kashmiris might want independence, but a larger number want to stay with India than go to Pakistan, right? So I assume independence is an option, but both sides have to agree to independence, that is Delhi and Islamabad, before the Srinagar gets independence. But the point is, and you know what she said to me, आज़ादी का माने अलग-अलग चीज अलग-अलग लोगों के लिए होता है. So freedom is not just physical freedom as your entity as a sovereign state. Freedom is also the freedom from fear. Freedom to lead your life like a normal human being. If you can't guarantee that, Delhi is failing in its constitutional responsibility. Pakistan is failing in the humanitarian index. And the leaders of Kashmir, the less said about them, the better. I can go on and on about it, but it's a very complicated subject.
So, last three questions and very, very brief.
Okay, so my name is Girian Narona from Goa. My question is regarding anti-terrorism. Now, you spoke of ideologues and living with Pakistan on policy of you do something, we hit you hard. Okay. Now, in terms of ideologues, they have one factor that militates against this whole policy. Because strategically look at it. You kill them, they're like Hydra hits, they grow back. Right? You capture them, and you have what is happening like in the IC 814 crisis. We traded over Masood Azhar. I mean, are we trying to knock the man on his head, or should we be trying to sweep the carpet from under his feet, like the US counterinsurgency manual says? Actually trying to subvert their ideology.
So we take the last
Goa. I have a small question. Why Pakistan treats Balochistan so badly? They bomb their Baloch people are a part of Pakistan.
We are hearing you, sir.
They are a part of Pakistan. But every time I read any Pakistani newspaper, there is a news that they are not treated properly. They are even bombed. They bomb their own cities and towns. So why they treat them so badly?
Okay, so I got your point. Can we?
Hello. My name is Ashwin Kamath, and my question is, this is what we have talked is all about past. Now the future. There's an election coming in India. There's an election coming in Pakistan, and Imran Khan out there is also contemplating a new outlook of thinking and something which they have to internally go through their own democracy. What do you feel is going to come out of that, and how India has to support this?
And the last question. You can speak.
My name is Samir and I am from Kashmir. I am doing MA in Political Science in Goa University. My question is regarding Islam, that Islamic country is Pakistan and using the Islam as a tool of violence. For example, in Kashmir, there were large organizations, jihadi organizations like Jaish-e-Mohammed, Al-Jihad, Hizbul Mujahideen, Harkatul Mujahideen. They all make the one slogan popular in Kashmir, that is Pakistan se rishta kya la ilaha illallah, and this became the famous slogan in Kashmir. So all these organizations were supported by the Pakistan, because this is true, because they make this slogan famous in Kashmir. And this is not jihad to kill the women, to kill the innocent people, to kill the children. This is not jihad, and actually they just want to capture the territory of Kashmir, not to spread the Islam, not to make that's already Islamic country, and they just want to capture the territory and use the Islam as a tool. So which make us globally problem, and we change the globally perspective towards the Islam, and Islam is not treated as Islamic terrorism. So why Pakistan as a being, as an Islamic country do this?
Very good point. I'll start with the last and then come on to the other. I think this is the most relevant. Most people who use Islam, to motivate their men, to motivate their forces, haven't read enough or understood about Islam. In fact, if you read Karen Armstrong's book, Muhammad and the Prophet of Our Times, amongst other books, in which she argues that what these people are actually talking about is not jihad, but it is jihadiyat, right? Jihad is submission to the will of God, and jihad is a personal conquest that you have to take on against your desires and the ill will inside you. You have to submerge that, and that is jihad, jihadu akbar, right? So the fact of the matter is that I've always argued that there was that inverted crescent of conflict, starting perhaps from the Middle East, whether you go back to Iran or Iraq, and then coming through Central Asia, Chechnya, Pakistan, northern Pakistan, Afghanistan, and then ending in Kashmir. And this was the crescent which was used by a lot of jihadi groups in Pakistan. I mean, there are any number of books. Most recently, I would recommend Stephen Tankel's book, Storming the World Stage, the story of Lashkar-e-Toiba. And the Lashkar-e-Toiba has really actually can teach a lesson or two to Pakistan's government on financial and other management, if not at least management of the people. They've started Al-Dawa schools, which is the largest subscribed schools in Pakistan now in a big way. They collect money from even the animals that are sacrificed by the hides, selling the hides. They make money through all that. And for them, particularly Lashkar-e-Toiba, since 1992-93 onwards, for the last decade and the decade before that, various other groups that were launched into Pakistan. As I mentioned to you, Ziaul Haq became the first jihadi head of state. Unfortunately, the term jihad has begun to be used in a corrupted manner. It is not jihad, and he's rightly brought up the point that is not Islam. Islam, I mean, sadly, is portrayed as a religion which is used by conflict mongers, but it's a religion of peace. And if you read about Islam, if you understand Islam, Prophet Muhammad in his time, historically, went through two major phases in his life. In the first phase, when he proclaimed Islam, when he turned 40, and after that, when he was under huge pressure and persecution in Mecca, till he moved and set up his own township in Medina. And Medina in Arabic is a township. And he set up his own township of Medina when he was not under pressure. And if you take his statements when he was under pressure, and if you take his statements when he was not under pressure, they're actually completely opposite of each other. Now, so therefore people and Pakistani jihadi groups or whatever you call them have, or somebody says a so-called jihadi group, they have continued to use statements selectively from the times when he was under pressure, not from the time when he was much more secure and then talked of good relations. The greatest support in the Prophet's time, in his lifetime, was given to him by Jews. And see where Jewish Islamic relations are in the Middle East, at least if nowhere else in the world. So I think his point is very valid, but I think the Indian government has also failed in psychological warfare. It has failed to create greater awareness. जब वो अजान की जगह माइक्रोफोन से नारा लगा रहे थे मस्जिद के मीनारों से, at that time New Delhi should have done more. But the problem is that we a bunch of flat-footed idiots in Delhi who just can't react enough in time. So I think I have addressed that issue. The other 3 or 4 points that are brought out is in elections, will there be new thinking? Please remember, the history of Pakistani political wannabes is that they make one set of statements when they're out of power, they make another set of statements when they're in power. Let them sit down on the same table with the khaki-wearing generals. And as Emma Duncan has said in her book, Breaking the Curfew, that when Zia died, the politicians started horse trading again, but behind them stood the men in the khakis with medals on their chest, looking at these kids as school children, as masters do on a play field. Then I'll blow the whistle when your time's up. Okay, so that's the story. So don't expect too much from them. The third point is Balochistan. Balochistan historically was a colony of Oman, right? So it wasn't initially very much integrated into Pakistan pre-47 also. And post-47, the Pakistani discourse is largely dominated by the Sunni Musliman from Punjab. He makes up 74% of the army, he makes up more than 70% of the political bureaucratic elite, and the rest of them don't matter. Balochistan has a huge resource of natural gas, but even the city in Quetta, where bulk of the natural gas is there, doesn't get enough gas, but Islamabad and Rawalpindi gets enough natural gas from Balochistan. Baluchis have been always seen to be worse than scheduled castes or outsiders of their system. And even employment to people in Balochistan has never been given. Even the Pakistan army, at least until the 80s and 90s, their Baluch regiment didn't have Baluchis. They had Punjabis. They just had a Baluch regiment because it was seen the right thing to do to tell the world. So therefore, there is that huge divide between mainstream Pakistani elite and the Baluchis. The last question, if I can remember a bit about it, is about how do you deal with terror ideologues? You de-ideologize them, right? And this is what Ahmed Rashid said. The problem of Pakistan was that after the Cold War, they were still caught up in a Cold War mindset. You know, the world did not do enough to address the ideological baggage that not just the ideologues carried, but their military carried. They use these as tools of diplomacy, foreign policy, etc. But actually what they were doing was they were just carrying out a war which had become redundant, a modus of conflict. So we need to do that, but you cannot do that in isolation. Just like you can't fight a war only with infantry troops or artillery or aircrafts. You've got to use the whole lot of tools at your disposal to address the problem in its entirety. What's happened in Pakistan, from what I can understand, what we thought were the mainstreams, what we thought were Kuldeep Nair's candle lighting buddies from the other side of the Wagah border, they are now the marginalized bit. The mainstream are Hafid Saeed, Maulana Lakvi and others, cronies. They are all over. They may not be in the cities, but get the cities of India to vote and see what the voter population turnout in India is. Even after 2611, the voter turnout in Bombay was zilch, right? So the fact of the matter is the voting constituency is outside, and you have to go out and you have to make a relationship with them if the world wants to win the election. I do not see elections per se as a problem-solving phenomena for Pakistan or the third world, much as the world likes to believe that democracy begins and ends with the ballot box. It doesn't. There is a lot more that you need in terms of institutional frameworks, mindsets, etc. And please remember, other than India, outside the Western world, post-World War II, give me one example of a country that has grown by leaps and bounds as a democracy. All growth has been under benevolent dictators. So if Pakistan can have one, have it, deal with them, get your business going. Why are we passing moral strictures on what their system should be? Our concern should only be that they shouldn't hassle us. You get on with your life, we get on with ours. I'd like to end on that note because I've got to go and I have to chair a session elsewhere, so you'll have to forgive me.